All right, so up next, the state of Utah just got hit with a lawsuit from our friends over at the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, which is a First Amendment watchdog organization, over their new social media age verification law. So this law, it goes into effect on March 1st, and it essentially requires any social media user based in Utah to verify their age prior to using a service like Facebook or Instagram or something like that, even adults, to prove that they are not a minor. And then, if they are a minor, they must get written consent from their parents before they can use the service. So they're getting sued over this by Fire, and they're challenging it on First Amendment grounds, saying it violates the First Amendment rights of all Utah residents. And here's what they said in their statement. In Utah, government gatekeepers are restricting social media access through one-size-fits-all legislation that violates the rights of all Utah residents and ignores the way people use technology in the real world. Want to hop on Facebook? Facial recognition. Comment on Goodreads? We'll need the last 4 digits of your social. Pinterest? ID, please. And on January 12th, Fire sued Utah officials over the new law that requires every social media user in the state to verify their age. It second guesses Utah's families' judgments about how to manage young people's social media use, imposing a heavy-handed state dictate riddled with unconstitutional restrictions. And so essentially the argument is that people don't want to have to give their information to these platforms, and they don't see the need for a government mandate or meddling. And I guess there's also the case to be made that kids, some people believe kids should be able to use social media without parental permission. But I guess that's what will have to be decided. What's your initial thoughts?
Yes, I'm really familiar with this already because NetChoice has also sued over that. I'm a consultant for NetChoice. They're a free market trade organization for tech companies, and they sued on similar grounds in December. I also have a few other notes about the exact parts of the lawsuit. They say it violates the First Amendment because it prohibits somebody being able to share and receive information online and conditions that based on their willingness to hand over sensitive personal data to third-party age verification companies. They also said it violates the Supremacy Clause because it disregards existing federal law that ensures frivolous lawsuits aren't weaponized to curtail free speech. And there's also serious privacy concerns because you're having to hand over your data. So I've been digging into this for a little bit because Utah is by no means the only state that is passing this crud, and it's Republicans that are mostly driving it. California did pass it. They are currently being sued over their law as well. Ohio has a bill. Arkansas has a bill. There's lawsuits going against both of those. So this is very unconstitutional anti-free speech stuff. But it seems that Republicans just don't care. I think they know it's unconstitutional at this point. They know they're going to get sued. I think they mostly know it'll get struck down. I think they just don't care because they want to rev up their populace.
Hang on. I think you have to explain that. Why is it unconstitutional? Because a lot of people will say, well, kids need their parents' permission to do all sorts of things.
Not free speech, though. Your free speech is not based on your age, right? You don't all of a sudden have free speech rights when you turn 18. Parents absolutely, as your guardian, have the ability to monitor your use of technology and to even prohibit it. And there are so many tools that are coming out to that end that the tech companies in the free market are just naturally coming up with and providing to families. And that enables families to have a more customizable approach to how they want to moderate it. Some families don't mind if their kids are online. A lot of homeschoolers rely very heavily on online platforms. Kids who are in domestic abusive situations or who need information and maybe need to get it outside of their parents' ability or desire for them to get it, they have to be able to access these kinds of platforms. So when you say that to go online, to share information, to say information is restricted by your age, that right then and there is a free speech violation for those kids. But on top of that, this law doesn't just harm kids. It would apply to all people in Utah.
Right. Adults have to turn over their documents to get on Facebook. No, thank you.
So you're still making free speech conditional based on my willingness to give you my very private, sensitive data. I am sorry. If you need big tech and the government to come in and help you parent your kids in this manner, you should not have had kids. you're a bad parent, you failed. There are plenty of tools that you can use. I do think we could do a better job of perhaps educating people on what those tools look like, but it is ultimately your job as a parent to monitor your kids' use of technology and all kinds of media. I don't accept that that's something the government should be getting involved in. This is super anti-capitalist, putting this kind of burden on the tech companies also to collect this kind of information and process it and ascertain who's this age, who's that age. It's ridiculous. And I want to point out that all of this is going on all the while they are getting no better at solving the tremendous amount of child predator content online. There is a tremendous problem in this country right now that law enforcement is not rising to the occasion on, where we have explicit pictures of children circulating online. We have predators who are using the internet to try to target kids, and they are passing these kinds of laws, which will use up a ton of resources and not actually do anything to keep kids safer, while directing no resources towards that. In fact, after Gavin Newsom passed this similar legislation in California, he turned around and within the month released a whole bunch of child predators because their prisons were too full. Like, you can't make this kind of stuff up. I think that this is completely inexcusable. I think it's something that Republicans are trying to use to look tough on big tech and to come in and say, like, we're protecting the kids. It's always, politicians will always say it's for the kids, no matter what big government program they're trying to pass. They're always going to play on people's emotions and fears around children and say, this is for kids, this is for kids. But what it really is to give the government far more control over who has access to the internet and what they can see once they're on it. This is how China runs their system. This is not something that the U.S. government should be doing. And I think that the concern I have for it is that, we are seen as a leader in free speech, and other countries look at us for what we're doing and are often far behind us. If we set a standard to say that this is okay for governments to be able to control who gets online and what they see and how much about their personal data they have to hand over in order to access that, you don't think that could be used in nefarious ways in the very near future? Like, you think this is where it ends? That they're just so concerned about kids getting on Instagram. That's why they want all this data and all these rules in place. You'd have to be a fool to think that that is the end game here. Like, this is so obviously a bad idea. And on top of all of that, when you get into like the parental controls, right, over like what should kids be able to see online, what should they be able to access, that is something that mostly parents should be able to determine. But I did notice that in the lawsuit, several of the plaintiffs in Utah are people who were being brought up in the Polygamous Cult sector of Mormonism in the state and were being forced into marriages at like age 15 to their cousins, things of this nature, and were using online spaces to get help to get out of those situations. So yes, I do think parents for the most part should be able to determine when their kids are online and should, as a good parent, be involved in those decisions. But not all kids are in homes with parents with good intentions. There is a lot of child abuse in this country. There's a lot of trafficking that is mostly carried out by parents and relatives in this country. There are people who are in domestic violence situations. And there's also there's trans teens, who live in homes who don't support them getting access to information. All of these kinds of decisions about who can access information and who can get resources, you are putting all of those kinds of kids in danger with these kind of unilateral big government nanny state packages. It's very short-sighted. I think it will actually get kids harmed. And again, it's just patently unconstitutional. I mean, they have absolutely no legal grounds to do this.
So my question that I find very interesting about this law is that it also says that these companies aren't allowed to collect and store data on minors. So here's my question. If I'm Facebook and I'm required to verify your identity to allow you to use the platform and to verify your age and get parental consent, I presumably, if the law is telling me I must do that or I'm in violation of the law, must preserve some record that I have done that to prove it. So for example, I'm not allowed to save the children's data. Like if a 16-year-old sends in their driver's license, I'm not allowed to save that. But then when the government regulators come, I have to have proof that I'm following the law. So you can't win, right? Like you see the tension there. It's like you can't store the kids' data, but also you must collect and verify their data, and we're going to check if you've been doing it or not. Like it doesn't even make sense as a basic functionality of how this could be complied with successfully, which is not exactly a sign of great and thoughtful lawmaking.
Well, it's also, I think, a sign of what I said earlier, right? Like, they have to put those kinds of components in these bills. They're not going to collect your data because, of course, Republicans would rightfully freak out if these companies were able to collect their data. So they put those kinds of stipulations in there, understanding.
Well, they do. You're kidding if they don't. You think they don't.
I know, but I'm saying, like, this is how they pass these bills and get away with it with their constituents. And I think, again, ultimately, they know they're going to be struck down. Like, I refuse to believe that lawmakers are this stupid. They're not the brightest, but they're not this stupid. They know this is going to get struck down. And that should make you even madder, because ultimately what they're doing is wasting state resources and everybody's time and money to virtue signal and taking a chance that really bad, unconstitutional, anti-capitalist precedent gets put into place. Like, this is bottom of the barrel lawmaking. I think it's inexcusable. It makes me viscerally angry that it's Republicans who are mostly leading this charge. You know, we talk a lot about how the left has no more respect for free speech. I mean, just openly anti-free speech at this point. But people have got to start paying attention to what's happening at the state level, because Republicans are passing legislation that is anti-free speech far more regularly than I'm seeing Democrats pass it. And it's very concerning. This is one of multiple lawsuits on these kinds of grounds I've been tracking. And there are many other states looking into it. So if you don't know what's going on in your state right now, I guarantee you need to look into this, because there's a very good chance somebody's circulating a similar bill. We just started sessions last week and this week. So find out. You need to look into this. It's spreading like wildfire.